Today, we get to prepare for a celebration to our Lord. God is doing a new thing. More and more Christians are seeing the significance of celebrating the festivals of our Lord. And today, we're going to cook the recipes that I love to share with my family at the first festival of our Lord. So first, let me share with you a number of benefits of celebrating the feast of our Lord. Number one, a better understanding of the Bible. The Bible was first shared through pictures. The Old Testament is a complete picture of the coming Messiah. As the families relived and they acted out the stories, they were continuing the story to their children and how God provides. Not only a release from slavery, but a coming king. Number two, a rediscovery of our Jewish roots. And we are grafted in, and that makes us family. Number three, a renewed passion for Jesus. What storybook character can your child act out by memory? Well, this is how we want them to act out the story of God's love and redemption. Reason number four, greater insights into God's prophetic seasons. Reason number five, a discovery of the biblical church calendar. Celebrating the festivals of our Lord are not about what we have to do. It's about what we get to do. It is a blessing. It's not a burden. It's an act of love, not of legalism. I want to continually remind my grandchildren what the love of God looks like. It is the story of Esther and Purim. It is the story of the Passover and the Lamb. In Romans 15:4, Paul said, "For whatever things were written before were written for our learning." By celebrating Jesus in the festivals, we can learn more fully about what Jesus has done for us and how to walk with him in our everyday lives. I highly recommend the book by Dr. Richard Booker, and it's titled Celebrating Jesus in the Biblical Feast. Now, let's move on to the Feast of Passover. Christians traditionally call the Pasch Supper the Lord's Supper. But actually, it's our Lord celebrating the Feast of Passover with his disciples. It was a covenant meal. It symbolized Jesus giving his life for us and for his disciples. The church in Corinth consisted primarily of non-Jewish believers. Yet Paul wrote to them and he said, "Therefore, purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you are truly unleavened. For indeed, Christ, our Passover, it was sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast, not with the old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth." This is in 1 Corinthians 5, 7, and 8. So today, as we celebrate the Passover in our homes, we are painting this picture. We are pointing to Jesus as our Passover lamb. And we also get to revisit the story of the first Passover in Egypt. And we get to teach our children how God cares for his own, no matter what they are dealing with, no matter what they're going through. He is the same God today as he was back then. And the word Seder means order. It is a precise way of telling the story so that the elements of the story have meaning. So today we're going to start with cooking lamb. And we're going to start with that, and then we're going to share all the recipes that I serve to my family. Now remember, the recipes you serve are to be a delight to your family. So if there's a recipe that I'm sharing with you, you're like, yeah, my family's not going to go for that, then substitute it for one that your family does love. So remember, we're going to start with the lamb. There's two different meats that are typically served on Passover. It's going to be the lamb, which there's so many stories in scriptures about the lamb. And we want our children and our grandchildren to know these stories. We want them to know how Jesus is the sacrificial lamb and why they did sacrifice lambs and why did sacrifices end after Jesus was resurrected. A few years later, the temple was demolished and sacrifices ended at that point, and they haven't begun since. We want our children to understand these stories. We want them to understand the lamb. But you could also serve fish. Remember, Jesus served fish after he was resurrected to his disciples right there on the Sea of Galilee. Such a beautiful picture. So pick a meat that your family will enjoy, or if you haven't tried lamb, I suggest you try it, and I'm going to teach you how right now. We're going to start with the chocolate fudge pie. So as you think about how you would plan your meal to get it all on the table at that time, the right time at night, we're going to start with the chocolate fudge pie because that has to cook for 30 minutes. And then we want it cool for dinner. We're going to then move into the lamb and then the baked fruit delight. Like I said before, make sure you have the recipes downloaded and printed out so you can make notes as we go. All right, chocolate fudge pie. Now, this is a recipe that has no leavening in it. So remember, if you've been following the Jewish festivals, we are coming to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which means there's no leaven in the house if you want to go ahead and play that game with your children and your grandchildren. So that both these two desserts do not have any leavening. So what we've done is I went ahead and started the first step. So the first step is we take a half a cup of butter, and to that I melt some chocolate chips. Now, it actually says just some bittersweet chocolate. I actually found some Lily's chocolate chips that are sweetened with stevia. So we've got the antioxidant value of the dark chocolate, and then we have less sweetener because we're using stevia. And believe it or not, they're actually pretty good. So I've gone ahead and melted that. So that has already been melted on the stove. To this, we're going to go ahead and follow our recipe. And now it says we're going to go ahead and add in our sucanat. Now, sucanat is becoming very hard to find. So it could be just an organic sugar, coconut sugar. Any of those would be a good option. Okay, so I just really want that blended well. And if you're using a sweetened chocolate chip, you could really use less sugar, whichever kind of sugar you're using. Next, we're going to go ahead and whip up 3 eggs. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and use my Bosch whisk. And if you have the Bosch, you know how great and easy this is to use. So we're going to whip up the eggs and go ahead and start that. I'm going to try it without the lid, just for the fun of it. There we go. I'm going to add to this the vanilla. Whip that in. And just stay there. We're going to go ahead and now add into this our chocolate mix. If I was left-handed, I would be able to show this better to you while I'm doing it. But since I'm right-handed, let's see if I can give you a better view here. And if you are a chocolate lover like my family, they're going to say, don't leave any in the pan. Make sure it's all in the pie. This is kind of a dense pie, as you'll see as it comes out of the oven and we serve it. But I always like it when I'm having guests that I have my desserts and part of my meal prepared the day ahead of time. So this is definitely something I would prepare the day ahead. Okay, so we got that. We'll mix that in, and then we're going to add our coconut. Okay, let me make sure I get my wood spoon out of there, and we're going to add in the coconut next. Okay. So we've got our coconut, and then we have just a little bit of sugar left for the topping when we're done. That's really it. That is pretty much the entire pie. Now, some of you might be saying, well, Annette, but egg whites are a leavening. And you're actually sort of right. But we're not going to count them as a leavening this time. Now, to prepare our pie plate, we're just going to dust it with some dark cocoa powder. This is an organic, unsweetened cocoa powder. And we're just going to dust our pie plate with this. And then we're going to go ahead, make sure I have enough so it doesn't stick. Then we're going to pour our pie mixture into the plate, and we're going to bake it at 350 for 30 minutes. Take my whisk out, just set those to the side, and then we'll go ahead and add our pie into this. So you can tell it's pretty much a custard pie. You could so make this your own recipe. You could add in some nuts. You could add in some chopped dried fruit. I would imagine you could come up with other things to add in. The coconut is what I like. You could add more coconut than what I put in. I used, looks like a half a cup of coconut. And the coconut is to be dried. It's not to be sweetened coconut. We do not want that sticky sweet coconut. We want the dried coconut with no sweetener on it. You can even get it organic. It's very popular now, so it is easy to find. Okay, I think we've got that pretty good. So we're just going to put that in the pie plate and then bake that for 30 minutes. It's going to rise a little bit because we do have those egg whites in there, but it will also drop after we take it out of the oven. So it's definitely a fudge pie. Okay, we're going to put this in the oven for 30 minutes and let it bake. Now, while our pie is baking, we're going to work on the lamb. Now, you may actually want to start with the lamb because it has to bake for a lot longer, and it also depends on the size of the lamb. I actually have 2 different lambs going here, and I'm going to share with you both of them. So this is a leg of lamb that I was able to pick up at the grocery store today. And what we're going to do is you want to bring it home, you want to rinse it, and you want to pat it dry. After that, you want to make some incisions into it, and we are going to put a paste into these incisions. I say incisions because I grew up in the medical field. So say grew up because most of my adult work was in the medical field. So I'm just going to make some cuts into it. That will also enhance the baking, but we're really more interested in the flavor. So let me turn it around close where you can see it. Now, what we're going to do is I've taken 4 cloves of garlic and minced those. We also have some freshly crushed salt and black pepper. So I'm going to mince these together. And then we're going to use this as a paste to marinate the lamb. Once we have this done, we would then let it rest for 30 minutes. You can let it rest at room temperature or in the refrigerator. Now we're going to add some rosemary because if you've ever heard of baking lamb, it's almost always has some rosemary. Now these are my herb shears, and I like it because they make like 4 cuts at one time. Totally speeds up the process. I know some of you are probably really good with the chef's knife, so you're going to say, oh, I can do that so much faster. But sometimes I just like fun tools to work with, and this is another one of them. So adding in the rosemary. You'll notice my sprigs of rosemary not very long because it's just early spring and we don't have a lot of new growth. So the new growth is what I want because it has a better flavor. And we just went through a hard freeze a month ago. And so the rosemary that was in the hard freeze is just a little bit woody tasting. So I want the fresh growth right at the end for this. Okay, we've got that. Let me mix that up. And then we're going to just kind of push this all over the lamb and especially into those cuts so that we can get that flavor into those cuts. Now, if you buy a marinated lamb already from the store, it already has the flavor in it. What I would do is bring it home and just wash it really good and get rid of all the flavoring that's been put on it because I want you to make sure, one, that the lamb is fresh. Sometimes when it comes pre-seasoned, you don't know if it's really good fresh meat. And then you want to add your own seasonings. So if you have to buy a seasoned lamb because it's the only thing available in the store, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up over it, just enjoy it, but bring it home, wash it because sometimes it's very heavy in salt and we do not want that high of a salt content, and I want some really fresh herbs. So the fresher the herbs, the better the flavor. Okay, so to get that ready, we're going to put it in our roasting pan, and I prefer a roasting pan that has a drip tray in it. And I've already sprayed this so it won't stick. And we're going to let that sit for 30 minutes and then bake it for about an hour and a half, depending on the size of your lamb. We want the internal temperature to be about 135. So that's what we're looking for. So I'm going to set this over here to rest. Now we're going to do one of those cooking show, amazing things. I'm going to show you the lamb that we just pulled out of the oven. And this was a smaller lamb and it did not have the bone in it. So it cooked a lot faster than the lamb would have. Like that lamb is going to take a lot longer. There's a little bit of meat juices here, so I'm just going to sprinkle those on top. Now, to create a glaze for your lamb, we're going to go ahead and go to the stove, and I'm going to show you how to make a glaze. In the recipe, you're going to see that it calls for either some cooking wine or some broth. We're actually using some marsala. We're going to take the juice that was in the tray, except for that little bit that I just put over top, and we're going to cook it down with some salt, some pepper, and the marsala until we have a nice thick glaze. Then we'll put that on top of our lamb, and we are good to go. So let me move over to the stove. Okay, so I have the meat juices here in the pan, and I've added our broth or the cooking wine, whichever you're going to use. To this, we're going to add just a little bit of spritz of some freshly ground pepper, and again, some freshly ground salt. I wouldn't put a lot because you can always add more later. We also have salt seasonings in the pan drippings. So we're going to let this cook down, and then it'll be a fantastic glaze for our lamb. Now this really, I don't really want it on super high heat, so I want it about medium high, and it really should only take about 3 to 5 minutes to cook down. You can kind of hear my gas stove popping. So you can tell just after about 5 minutes, we have a nice reduced sauce. So I'm going to take this back over to the counter, pour it on top of our lamb. I even could wait till we're ready to serve the lamb so it's nice and popping hot on top of the lamb. But for this, I just want to show you how to do it. So we're going to go ahead and put it on the lamb right now. So now we can just take this sauce and just put it on top of our lamb. And your family is just going to think that you are a gourmet chef. They're going to think you're on the greatest cruise ship ever to have a nice seasoned and marinated lamb. So we're going to be adding some mashed potatoes to this because when you are putting together your Passover or your Resurrection Sunday meal, you've got to please everyone in the family. So mashed potatoes and meat, my husband's happy. That's all I have to make. But before we go there, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next dessert, which is the baked fruit delight. So I'm just going to push this aside and we're going to move on to that recipe. So let me just gather. We're going to need a 9 by 12 baking dish. And all we have to do is just add the ingredients in the baking dish, bake it, and we're done. It's that easy. You're going to spend more time prepping than you are mixing. Go ahead and use this. So it calls for currants, and I'm having a really hard time in the grocery store finding currants. We're going to add to this. So I'm using raisins instead. I'm adding my frozen cherries, and it's okay if they've already defrosted. My blueberries and my pineapple. And we have some freshly chopped apples. Totally up to you if you like the skin on or the skin off. If they're organic, I want the skin on just for the extra fiber and nutrition. We've got our chopped dates. Now, a lot of times the dates are going to come without the pit in them, but sometimes you're going to buy it with the pit. So today I actually accidentally bought them with the pit, so we just did a little extra labor there. We're going to add our juice of an orange. The recipe also calls for water. I actually don't use the water. I don't really think it needs it. The fruit usually adds enough. We're going to add our cinnamon, our nutmeg, and we still have 2 more ingredients. Okay, got it all. So we got our chopped nuts. You could use walnuts or pecans, and this time we're actually doing both. We've got a mixture of walnuts and pecans, and then we got our zested lemon. And that's it. All you do is just mix it up in this baking dish, bake it in the oven at 350 for 30 minutes, and you have the baked fruit delight. You definitely want to make sure the apples are baked enough that they're really tender, like a delicious baked apple. And you want to make sure everything is stirred up well too. Of all the ingredients in here, the currants were my favorite, but since I'm not finding the currants, the dates are really going to add that sweetness that your family is used to. Then we're going to top this with a sauce. Now you can make it a chocolate sauce or a strawberry sauce. And that's why I have my Bosch here ready to go. We're going to make it a strawberry sauce today. So you can eat this baked fruit delight. I have served it for breakfast when I've had guests. You could put some yogurt on top of it to add some protein. I've served it for breakfast. I've served it for lunch. I've served it for dinner. You could put it on top of a salad. Like if you had a bed of lettuce and some nice greens like arugula, watercress, any of those greens, you could put it on top of the salad. It's just one of my favorite go-tos. Okay, I think we've got this done. We're going to pop this in the oven for 30 minutes and bake this dish. Now we come to the quinoa parsley salad. Now there's a reason why I like this dish served at Passover or your Resurrection Sunday dinner, because of the parsley. Parsley is a bitter herb. Bitter herb is a reminder of the trials that we go through, or especially for the Israelites for being in slavery. So I share all of these tips with you in that handout, so make sure you printed out that handout. Okay, so let's go ahead and mix this up. I've already cooked the quinoa, and it's good to just have quinoa on hand. You could cook it and you can freeze it in 1 cup serving, so you always have it. To this, we're going to add our finely chopped celery, our green onions, and I like to chop not only the white bulb, but also the green stems. You could use shallots, you could use whatever you want. Now we're going to add our lemon juice, our freshly squeezed lemon juice. Freshly squeezed is just so much better flavor than what you buy in a container. We're going to add our olive oil. And I have several videos on olive oil and the meaning of that. We've got some honey as a light sweetener. So it's kind of a savory, sweet dish. We know everybody likes their sweetness. And to this, we're going to add our freshly crushed salt and pepper. Now, another thing that this recipe calls for, besides the parsley, which I'm going to get there, is it calls for chopped apricots. I actually had some apricots ready for this dish. They were Turkish apricots. They were organic, but they didn't have, what was the name of the word I was looking for? They didn't have the sulfites on it, so they were no longer orange or yellow, and they just looked brown and ugly. Well, we took the consensus of the ones that are going to be enjoying this dinner, and we don't really like apricots. So we're going to add chopped dried cherries instead. That way, everyone will enjoy the dish. So I'm going to mix this up. And this is just a 4-person serving, so it's not a huge dish. So if you're going to be serving a lot more than 4 people at your dinner, then definitely you need to double or triple this. Let me put this aside, and let's start on the parsley. So this parsley was looking pretty sad. I brought it home and I didn't put it in any water. So I had to liven it back up. So I just put it in a container. You can use a mason jar. This is half of an herb saver jar. The other half would have enclosed it, but I also needed to freshen up my cilantro for another dish that I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and just tear off my parsley. And you're going to want a good amount of parsley. So remember, parsley is your bitter herb, so it satisfies that part of our Passover meal. Also, if you are following a Seder traditionally, you would take the, so I could use my herb shears for this. Sometimes I cut it and sometimes I use my herb shears. So you would take the parsley and just leave a piece of parsley at everyone's, not that one. You would leave a piece of parsley that looks nice and fresh at the place setting of everyone at the table. You would also give them their own little dish of salt water. And as you go through the Seder meal, you would be dipping that in the salt water and then eating it. And that's just part of the Seder presentation. And it's all about reminders of what happened in Exodus, what happened as the example of Jesus's blood on the doorpost, how it saved them that one night. And it was just by grace in faith that saved them, because they were inside the home. They were not outside to see the blood. They were not outside to see the death angel go over. They did what they were told to do, and they trusted God in the results. And then we know the end of the story. They were saved. The firstborn of every male was killed that night. And if there were any Israelites who didn't do what they were supposed to, then the firstborn male of that family would have still been killed, because only the Jews, the Israelites that followed the instructions, would have been saved. And from there, they go into the wilderness, And there God tries to teach them so much about himself because he leads them, with the cloud and the fire, and he wants to be in the middle of their presence where they put the tabernacle. So much richness to that story, yet man took a short journey and made it a 40-year experience. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, how many times are we taking just a short journey, a short lesson, and expanding it to 20, 30 years of our life? Like, I don't have this down, because we just don't trust God. And God's like, hey, just trust me, and he just wants to be there for us. Isn't that just a beautiful salad? So we're going to top it off. The recipe calls for some pumpkin seeds. Now, as I was shopping for this cooking class, I couldn't find any pumpkin seeds that were not from a foreign country. And so I'm reverting to my sesame seeds because they are actually here in the US and they were organic. And so here we have our dish. So I'm going to put it in our serving dish. So it is ready to be served. I'm just going to chill it until dinner time whenever I'm serving my guest. And this is amazingly delicious. You may think, well, I'm not really crazy about that dish. Try it, because I guarantee you're going to like it. And it's just going to give you that flavor that's like, okay, we've got some sweets, we've got some potatoes, we got our meat, and just that extra dish that's going to really add to the meal. Plus it has the parsley, which is the bitter herb. So we definitely want to have some bitter herbs in our meal. So we could definitely add a little bit more parsley, make it look a little bit more colorful. Not that we need to add much color. And there we have our quinoa parsley salad.
Hi y'all, I am Rhonda Carroll. I am so excited to be here today with Annette Reader as we are going to show you some wonderful recipes for our Passover meal that we're going to be making together. And I have 4 recipes that I want to show you all today. I'm going to do an unleavened bread, a roasted asparagus, disciple eggs, because we're not going to have deviled eggs on our Passover table, but we're going to have disciple eggs, and then a wonderful fruit salad. So I'm so excited to be able to share these recipes with you today. The first recipe that we're going to do is unleavened bread. And unleavened bread is one of the easiest things to make. Now, I love making bread, and I do make unleavened bread quite a bit because it's a nice kind of addition to some of our meals. I like to kind of change up things. But the reason that we have unleavened bread during Passover is it's to commemorate back in Exodus, whenever the Israelites had to flee from Egypt, from slavery, and they did not have time to let their bread rise. So God told them that he wanted them to commemorate that by having the festival of unleavened bread. So that was the reason that we're going to have unleavened bread at our Passover table. So unleavened bread, our recipe is we're going to use 2 cups of whole wheat flour, and I'm going to use spelt today. And I just want to kind of add in, if you don't have a grain meal, I encourage you to check into that. And Annette's got some wonderful videos on the Biblical Nutritionist that show you the different meals, and that you can, and y'all can tell I'm from the South. And when I was doing a conference, I have to tell this funny story. With my Southern accent, they were all thinking I was saying M-E-A-L, like a meal. I'm going to go eat, but I'm saying M-I-L-L. So for those of y'all in the North, just so you'll know what I'm talking about, a grain meal that you can put your grain, and I'm going to show you. Let's see, I have them right over here. You can take your wheat berries and then you put them in your meal, and it makes a wonderful flour. Now, this flour is so nutritious. There are 44 essential vitamins and minerals that our body needs, and freshly milled flour has 40 of those, and that's just amazing. Now, the thing is, you do want it fresh, because after a few days, because of those they have antioxidants and things in it, the nutrients will begin to oxidize. So after a little bit, you'll still have the fiber, but not all the great vitamins and minerals. So that's why it's so important to be fresh. But if you don't have the freshly milled flour, that's fine. You can use just your store-bought whole wheat flour. I am actually using spelt today that I have put into my meal. So I'm going to use the 2 cups flour. And then in my bowl, I already have 3/4 cup cold water. You can also use milk. Milk just kind of gives it a kind of a richer flavor. And then I have 2 tablespoons olive oil, 1 teaspoon sea salt. And then I'm going to add a 1/2 of a medium onion chopped finely. So we're going to put that in there. 1 garlic clove. I've already got it minced and chopped up. It's going to give it a wonderful flavor. And I'm just going to kind of give that a stir. You can also add in any kind of herbs and things if you wanted to. I'm just going to kind of make mine today a little just plain because I'm also going to make a dipping sauce. And in that olive oil dipping sauce, I'm going to add some more herbs and spices into it. So, but you could definitely put in some oregano, rosemary, thyme, some Italian seasoning. That would be wonderful as well. So just kind of play with it. It's just whatever your family prefers. You just have fun. So you can add in any kind of flavorings that you would like. So then I'm going to go here to my beautiful flour. We're going to put 2 cups. Just that. Then we're going to stir it in. This out of the way so it keeps sliding. I'm just going to kind of give it a little bit of pressing it down there to kind of get that to come in. The one thing I like about making bread is I like to get my hands in it, like to have fun. I'm still one of those kids. I used to love to play with Play-Doh and things like that. But it's also nice if you've had a hard day or a rough day and you just need to work out some stress. Making bread's a great thing to do that. So, all right, that's pretty much come together. So I'm just going to take my surface here. Put a little bit of flour so it doesn't stick. You see how beautiful that's already coming together. And then comes the fun part. We're going to knead it. Now, kneading bread is not, again, hard. You're just kind of making little folds. And we're going to want to knead this for about 2 to 3 minutes until you really start, like I said, that dough really kind of starts coming together. And I'm just kind of folding it. I'm going to just kind of keep my surface floured. And again, just while I'm kind of kneading this, we can talk a little bit more too about, and I love to do meal prep classes, and I do those a lot in the Biblical Nutrition Inner Circle. And so we talk about how important it is to have a plan, to have things prepped so that when things get busy, I mean, I work full time, I have 2 teenage girls, and so things get a little crazy at our house. So I definitely want to have fresh meals, things that are healthy for us to eat. So this bread, so I wanted to let you know, there are many things you can do with it, not just to have for your Passover meal, not just for just having your unleavened bread. What you can also do is it makes a great pizza crust. So you could put just a little bit of any type of sauce and some fresh vegetables and maybe a little sprinkle of cheese and it would make a great pizza. You can also take it and put a little hummus and fresh vegetables on it. It makes a great lunch. So I love things that I can use for more than one meal. So I just think, and I do a class called Cook Once, Eat Twice. And by that, I mean, if I'm going to be in the kitchen and I'm going to prep food, then I'm going to make the most out of it. So if I could take this and make several different meals, then I'm already ahead of the game. And these freeze really well. So I would typically, I'm not going to do that today, but I would typically do a double recipe. So I would use one recipe for the meal that I'm preparing, and then I would take the recipe that I cook and put it in the freezer. So then I've already got that already made. So on days that are crazy and I'm coming in, I'm thinking, what can I make for dinner? And I can pull them out and we have first steps already made. As you can see how easy that was. Now what I'm going to do, turn it. You don't have to be precise in how you divide up the dough, but we want to divide this into 8 parts. So I'm just going to kind of make it just a little bit thinner. I come in and do right in the middle, and then in the half, and then half of that one, and then come in and half between those. And now I have 8 equal parts. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you just want to make kind of, get it as best you can. And then each of those, we're going to roll into a ball. And you just, like you used to do if you've ever played with Play-Doh or things, you're just going to roll it around in your hand and make a ball. Just kind of getting it together a little bit. And then again, just come in and roll it around. And that garlic onion smells so good. So this is going to make a great unleavened bread. That'll be a nice bread with our meal. Just roll it around. And some doughs you have to let rest and do those things, and you don't have to do that with this one. And of course, since it doesn't have any yeast in it, you don't have to let it rise. So it's very quick. Another reason why I like it. And the last one. Another fun thing that you can also do with this is once you've cooked it, you can, and you're using it for, you wanted some other things to do with it, you can put a little butter and some cinnamon and kind of crisp it again in the oven, and it goes wonderfully with like a fruit salsa. So that's another great idea. So there we go. Easy as can be. Then I'm going to grab my pan. And you do want to put it on a greased pan. And then I'm just going to take my dough and I'm going to just kind of press it, get a little bit more flour. Move these out of the way. Maybe you can see a little better. And this, depending on how thin you roll it, is going to be the texture of your bread. If you roll it really thin, it's going to be more like a cracker and it will be crispy, which is perfectly fine if that's the way you prefer. Or you can make it a little bit thicker where it'll be a little bit chewier, and you're not going to cook it maybe a minute or two less. And that's generally how I make mine. We like it just a little bit more on the chewier side rather than crispy. But again, just your preference, how you prefer. So, kind of see? Then I'm going to put it on my pan. I'm going to prick it a few times with the pork. There we go. Do one more. Again, it's a really soft dough, so it's not hard to roll out. And it doesn't, some doughs you have to kind of keep working with because they're real springy and they'll kind of keep going back. But this one, very easy to work with. So if you haven't ever made homemade bread, this is a great one to start out with. Don't be afraid because it's very forgiving. It's very easy to work with. And if you happen to roll it out and then you don't, whatever reason, don't like it, just put it back in a ball and start over. That one on my pan. Prick it with a fork. Do one more. If you want it in a really round circle, you can keep turning it as you're rolling it, and that will make it a little bit more round. But I kind of like the uneven sides a little bit. I think it just kind of gives it a little bit of personality. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right, and there's that one. So now you're going to take those and you're going to bake them in a preheated oven at 450 degrees. And depending on what kind of texture you want is how long you're going to bake it. Typically, I bake mine for about 10 minutes. But if you want yours crispier, you might need to go another minute or two more. Or if you want it, like I said, a little bit more on the chewier side, then maybe a little bit less. So I'd check it after about 8 minutes and just kind of see, where you're at, if it's where the kind of the texture and doneness that you prefer. All right, so move that out of the way. Give my hands a quick rinse. And these would go in the oven. And I already have some already made. And then these are what they look like. Isn't that beautiful? And so again, as you can kind of see, so we're going to, for our meal, for our Passover meal, I'm fixing to do a dipping sauce. But you can see how these would make a wonderful, like I said, put a little bit of hummus and some fresh vegetables and things on them. Great lunch, a little personal pizza. So lots of fun things, or a little butter and a little cinnamon. And you can cut them into 2 triangles and eat it with like a nice homemade fruit salsa. So again, I like recipes that are versatile, that you can change up. Now, if you, just as a reminder, if you were doing the chips with the cinnamon and making it for fruit salsa, don't put the onion or garlic in it. That would not be very good. You just make the plain dough. And you could even put a little cinnamon in the dough, and that would be perfectly fine. But there's our unleavened bread. And then everybody can just have a slice. Now, for our dipping sauce, going to use a good quality olive oil, 5 garlic cloves that I already have that have been minced, a little parsley, 1/4 teaspoon salt, and some Italian seasoning. Now again, this is another, depending on what kind of flavors that you like, you can change up your the flavors that you use, your spices and herbs, so whatever you prefer. That's the neat thing, that you can just, whatever, like I said, whatever your family likes. And then you're just going to mix that in the olive oil. Fresh ground pepper is another lovely thing to put in it. Oh, it smells so good. And then you can just give everybody, however you want to serve it. You can put it like on a little saucer and put a little bit out, and then they can just tear their unleavened bread and dip it into their dipping sauce. Very, very nice, and a great addition to your meal. And that's it. That is so simple. So, all right, so I'm going to move. So I really hope everybody will try to make the unleavened bread, if you've never done it before, especially. And then post on Facebook or how you did, maybe a picture of it, how easy it was, and how the different herbs and different things you used. I would love to hear that. All right, now we're going to move on to our next recipe, which is roasted asparagus. Now, I have to tell you, I have fallen in love with roasted vegetables. I've been roasting vegetables for a while now, but for whatever reason, I don't know. I thought it was going to be something that was going to be really hard, and just kind of didn't try it. I kind of grew up on, we did a lot of vegetables, but they were mainly steamed. And, I'm really a big person about texture. When I'm doing meals, I like to have different textures. So I think I didn't like a lot of vegetables growing up because I didn't like the texture of the steamed vegetables. So several years ago, I started with roasting vegetables, and I love them. Main reason is because a lot of times they don't get, as I would say, mushy. So you have a nice texture, a nice flavor. I think that roasting really brings out the flavor. So I have some asparagus. I've already got them on my pan. Funny little story with asparagus. Not long after I got married, I was trying to be this, good wife, trying to cook all these wonderful meals. And I've always enjoyed cooking. And so and I don't want to date myself how old I am, but we didn't really have as much on the internet back then when I got married. So I couldn't just get on and search and say, okay, asparagus recipes. But I had some cookbooks, and I thought, I'm going to make some asparagus. That's something I haven't made. So I bought some fresh asparagus, and I got a recipe, and I steamed it because I knew what to do. I'll never forget my husband, Jake. He was very sweet, but he kind of took a bite, and I could tell he was just kind of chewing and chewing. I'm thinking, goodness, I thought I cooked those long enough. Why are they so chewy? And I didn't take the stem off. I didn't realize like I said, I didn't know that you were supposed to take the stem part, which is kind of a woody part, and it can be very chewy. And so we still laugh about that. So let me just encourage you, when you buy fresh asparagus, if you've never cooked it before, make sure you trim the ends off. And most of the time you can just take it and it'll kind of break where that stem is at. So it's not, it's just like I said, it's not real hard, but just make sure you do that so you don't do the same thing that I did and have those really chewy ends at the end of your asparagus. Not very tasty. Roasting vegetables, again, is something that is so easy, but again, like I said, it just really, I think, brings out the flavor of the vegetables. I like asparagus. I think it's a great spring vegetable to have, and I just like the way it looks. I think it's very pretty on the table. So what I'm going to do, again, this is another really versatile recipe, is I'm just going to do it very simple. Again, you can take it, and if you prefer like a lot of garlic or different herbs and different things, definitely can add those. So it's just, again, it's just preference and taste. But I just kind of want to show you how simple that you can be, and you can use this with any of your other vegetables as well. Is I'm just going to use my asparagus, and I'm just going to do a drizzle of olive oil. And it would probably be 1 to 2 teaspoons of oil, just enough to kind of coat it. I'm just going to kind of drizzle that on there. And then a little bit of salt. And honestly, or sea salt, that was sea salt. That's all I'm going to use. And it's just wonderful, even with just that little bit. Now, something that's really nice, after you've roasted the asparagus and you pull it out of the oven, you can put a little bit of lemon zest and fresh lemon juice on there. And that's wonderful because it really kind of livens up the taste and makes it, it gives it a really nice flavor. You can also do just a little bit of Parmesan cheese, which is another nice thing. A small handful of mint or parsley. Those are also wonderful. So I encourage you to change it up. Maybe try some of these different things each time you make them. But then you just want to take that asparagus, and we're just going to kind of toss it in that olive oil and make sure they kind of get coated. Any of your vegetables, just kind of as a rule, if you're going to roast, typically want to roast at 400, 425. I generally do mine at 400 just because I get busy in the kitchen and sometimes forget to check them. So at 400, I can make it go just a little bit longer and won't burn as fast. But I generally do about 400, but you could do 425 depending on how your oven cooks. And then with asparagus, because these are not really big stalks, I'm going to start checking those after probably about 10, 12 minutes because they don't take long to roast. And the easiest way to check to see if your asparagus is done is just to put a fork. And if it pierces easily with that fork, then it's probably going to be done. Other vegetables, typically around 15 to 20 minutes, I would start checking depending on what you're cooking. Broccoli, of course, is not going to take, won't take as long as if you were doing like sweet potatoes or different things like that. But just like I said, just kind of keep an eye on and keep checking them. But I encourage you, if you haven't started roasting your vegetables, to roast some vegetables because they are amazing. I love to roast tomatoes and onions and garlic and things like that, and then put them over pasta. So that's another, like a whole wheat pasta or any type of thing like that. And it is wonderful. So that is it. So then I'm going to put this in the oven at 400 and let it roast for about 10, 12 minutes and check it. And then we'll have some wonderful roasted asparagus. And because I want y'all to have to wait to see what it looks like, here is the lovely roasted asparagus. Now, isn't that pretty? I just love the colors and the green, especially at this time of year is spring, because I love spring. I love that it just reminds me so much of how good the Lord is to us. And I go back to the scripture, his mercies are new every single day. And I love when everything starts budding and blooming and starts turning green. It just reminds me that God is so good and he gives us these beautiful things. And so I hope, again, you will try some of these wonderful vegetables and try to do them, like to roast them. But this is the asparagus. And again, you could do with any kind of seasonings, flavoring, herbs, whatever you prefer. It will be wonderful. And it will be beautiful on your table. All right. Now, the next thing that we're going to go to is our disciple eggs. Because again, we don't want deviled eggs at our table, right? Now, and I have to kind of laugh. Annette told a funny story that when she makes her Passover meal, she always takes one egg and cooks it for a little bit longer. Because, when you boil eggs and you cook them for too long, they get that green kind of thing on the outside of the egg yolk. And so she said she would always cook one longer and leave that one out with the green on it and say, well, that was like Judas's heart because he betrayed Jesus. And so I thought, well, that's a neat idea. So you might want to think about doing that at your meal, and leave one egg in the water a little bit longer, let it boil and turn green on the outside. And then you can remind everybody that was like Judas's heart who betrayed Jesus. So for our disciple eggs, just want to give you just kind of a reminder when you're boiling eggs. That's sometimes, people think, oh, well, boiling eggs are easy, but sometimes it is kind of difficult to know exactly when did they start boiling, how long to let them boil. But one of the things that works best for me with boiling eggs is to take my eggs, cover them with water, maybe an inch or two above the eggs, put them on the stove, turn it on, let it come to a rolling boil. So that means it's really boiling good. Turn the stove off, cover, and let them sit for about 10 minutes. And typically they are always perfect. Now, if you want an egg that's maybe not quite set as much in the center, then you would just do it for about 8 or 9 minutes. If you want it like a really hard boiled egg, then let it go for a couple more minutes, maybe, like I said, 10 to 12. So that always works for me again, but just put it in your pot, cover it with water, turn your stove on, let it come to a rolling boil, and let it, like I said, once it gets to that rolling boil, turn it off, cover, and let it sit for about 10 to 12 minutes. And typically your eggs will come out perfect. So that's just an easy way to cook your eggs. They have all kinds of egg cookers now that work really well too. A lot of people do their boiled eggs in the Instapot. That's another great way to do them. So you can definitely do them like that. So whatever, again, is easiest. Most of the time I'm doing things on the stove, I just put them on and let them go, and then I'll set my timer. And typically that's, like I said, works the easiest for me. But however you want to do them will work fine. So let me grab my ingredients. Disciple eggs is just something that, again, that I always grew up. I think it's just a fun thing to have, and always brings back memories because my mom always made disciple eggs. So I enjoy making them for my family as well. Eggs are another one of those things that it really is just according to taste. There are 500 disciple eggs recipes out there. So you just have to kind of look to see what does your family prefer? What kind of herbs do you think they're going to like? You can make them plain or as fancy as you want. So these were my eggs that I've already boiled, so you didn't have to wait for them to finish cooking. And then you didn't have to wait for me to peel all these eggs. Now, this is a great thing for you to get kids to help in the kitchen, is with your disciple eggs, because it's something very easy and they can learn to peel them and slice them and let them have a part in your helping with the meal. And I always encourage, let your kids in the kitchen, start teaching them those skills, grandkids, neighbors' kids. That's something that I think that we need to pass down to these generations that are coming up, because I think it's something that we've kind of, a lot of people have kind of put to the wayside is cooking. And that's such a wonderful way to be able to put healthy things on our table. We know that when we cook our own meals that we have control over what ingredients we're putting in them, and we know that they're going to be good for our families. So I encourage you, like I said, cook with some friends and start teaching them how to make these wonderful recipes. So for my disciple eggs, I'm going to use, I had about a dozen large eggs that I cooked. I'm going to use 2 teaspoons Dijon mustard. Again, that's another one of those things. Some people don't like mustard in their eggs. Some people do. So, and some people like just regular mustard. Some people like Dijon. Change it out to, like I said, however you like it. But I'm going to use Dijon mustard today. 1/3 cup of mayonnaise. Now, we like pickle relish. A lot of people do not like pickle relish in their eggs, but I am going to add about a tablespoon, just a little bit, but can definitely leave that out. And then just salt and pepper to taste. And that's basically it. Again, like I said, some people, like it just pretty much plain. And then some people like to really doctor up. Some people put like a little dash of hot sauce or cayenne pepper. It's another perfectly, fine thing to do. Again, just kind of something that's very versatile. And I'm not going to put, even though I've measured out my 1/3 cup of mayonnaise, I'm not going to put the whole thing in there, because sometimes it takes a little bit more, sometimes it takes a little bit less. I'd rather put less in there. That's not pickle rush. And it, rather than putting all, and then it be really wet, as I would say, or too much in it. So I'm just going to put probably about half of what I measured out, and that may be plenty. And actually, it looks like it's going to be. I always want to use a good quality mayonnaise as well. I love the avocado mayonnaise. But sometimes that taste can be a little strong for some people. So again, whatever you prefer. I encourage you to look for, like I said, for a good quality mayonnaise. And then you're just going to mix all those together. And I just generally, like I said, I'm just doing it with a fork. Just kind of mashing it. And that's how quickly. And that was plenty of mayonnaise. So again, like I said, it's always easier to put in less. And then you can always add to it. But once you put it in there and it's too much, you can't take it out. So that was actually perfect. So then that's the filling. Now, again, you can be as fancy or as simple with these as you want. A lot of times people will put them in like a piping bag that you would do like for decorating cakes and things, and put a beautiful little star, like at the star tip, makes a little fancy swirl. Another fun thing for kids to do, so you can do it that way. I am perfectly fine with just filling them. In fact, I kind of like, just because that's the way we always had them. And there's our beautiful disciple egg. But again, like I said, if you want to get a little fancy, you can put them in your piping bag and just pipe them in there. And I love this little plate that I have. This was something that my mom had, and I like it because it was what we typically had on our table growing up. And I do enjoy with the presentation of food. And I know a lot of times in our coaching classes, I talk to them about, even if you're just making a meal just for yourself, make it fun. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can go, thrift stores always have a lot of interesting, just little plates and different things that are fun. And just buy a couple, just something when you sit down to eat that you're not eating on a boring paper plate. Not that that's bad all the time, but just having a fun, special plate that's really pretty, that makes you happy. And we want to sit down and enjoy our meal. And so it's so much more fun when it's pretty. But again, it doesn't have to be anything expensive. You can find things at the thrift stores that people are getting rid of. And I know I always like to drink my hot tea and stuff from a pretty mug. It just makes me happy. And I love different kind of cups. So a lot of times for my birthdays and Christmas and things, I have people give me mugs because like I said, I enjoy them. I think they're fun. Right. That was very simple, very quick, very easy. The longest to make the disciple eggs is really waiting for your eggs to cook. Now, once you get them filled, and I'm not going to take the time to fill them all, you can come back and do, I like to do like a little smoked paprika. You can just do some regular paprika. You could put some chives, some parsley. It's another good thing to do. Again, very versatile, just whatever you prefer, what your family their taste. Very simple, and it makes such a nice complement to your meal. So I hope that you will make these. And a lot of times I think people don't make disciple eggs because they think it's very time consuming, but it's really not once you kind of get used to it. The biggest thing, like I said, is making your eggs. And I think if you'll try what I'm talking about, like I said, putting them in the pot and covering them and let them sit, typically they will peel very easy. I think that's probably the most aggravating part, is trying to peel the eggs. And if your eggs are really, really fresh, they don't peel as well. And so that kind of makes it a little bit more complicated. But that's why you bring your kids in or somebody else to help, and they can help you peel your eggs. So there's our disciple eggs. So wonderful. All right. Our last thing that we're going to put together is a fruit salad. One of my favorites. And I'm going to do a little bit of a twist on on the one that I make for you today. But I think the fruit salad, especially again at this time of year in spring and around here, some of the strawberries are starting to come in. It's just such a nice, fresh flavor to add to your table. Plus, I love the colors in the fruit salad. I think, again, all about the different colors and making your table pretty. And it's just an easy way to do that. So our fruit salad, I'm going to grab a big bowl. And I'm going to get all of our wonderful fruit that we're going to put in it. And now this is, again, one of those things just depends on what is your particular taste. So you can change out the fruits, you can add other fruits, take away fruits, whatever you prefer. All right. Now, I'm going to add, what I'm going to use today, it's over here, is I'm going to use strawberries, blueberries, apples, mandarin oranges, and pineapple. And again, whatever kind of fruits, you could even just do it easily with some apples, strawberries, bananas. And I will add a banana in a minute. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But again, just have fun with it. Make it light and fluffy. And it's just something, again, I think that really complements your meal. And we're going to make it fun. So I'm just going to add in, I have probably, and I didn't measure because I just, especially with fruit salad, just kind of depending what I had, probably about a cup and a half of strawberries. And I've got about a cup blueberries. And when I cut up my apple, I always leave the peeling on just because I like the extra fiber that you get in. You have a lot of the nutrients in the peeling, so I always leave it on. You can peel your apple if you don't want to do that. So however, you want to do it is fine. I love apple in my fruit salad because, again, I like the crisp texture. And then our oranges. And our pineapple. Pineapple is another one of those things that I a lot of times would buy canned, but I finally made myself start buying fresh, thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be hard. It is just a little bit time consuming to peel it, but the taste, oh my goodness, it's so amazing. And it's really not that hard to cut up. And it's much cheaper when you buy fresh pineapple. So isn't that pretty? All those beautiful fruits. I'll kind of go ahead and give it a stir and see those pretty colors. Now for the dressing that I'm going to put on this fruit salad is a yogurt dressing. And let me tell you the reason why. There's many kind of dressings that you can use. But again, I like to make things that can be used maybe possibly for other meals. So I'm going to make this with a yogurt dressing so that, because more than likely we will have leftovers that we can have for breakfast. And this is one reason why I'm not going to put my banana in there, because typically after a banana has been in there, if it's something we're going to eat the next day or possibly the next, it really starts to get mushy. And my preference is I don't particularly care for that. So I don't usually add the banana in until at the very last. And I'll show you that. But since I'm using yogurt, since I'm not doing like a whipped cream or something like that dressing, then it's something I can have for breakfast with some granola or something like that. So it's one of the reasons why, but I also really like this dressing. And so I'm going to use, this is just plain Greek yogurt. And I like to buy the plain because a lot of times some of the flavored yogurts that you get have a lot of sugar in them. Sometimes they can even have artificial flavors and things like that. So I like to buy the plain, and then I can put whatever flavors in that I want. So again, it's very, very simple. So what I'm going to add to my yogurt, and I'm going to grab my honey. I just realized I forgot to pull it out. So I'm going to grab it. And I'm going to add about 1/4 of a cup of honey. Now, if you didn't want to use honey, you can use any kind of sweetener. You could use a powdered sugar. really, I prefer to, of course, try to do a more of a natural sugar like honey, or you could use maple syrup. A lot of times, if I'm doing this, if I'm going to do it for some breakfast, I use liquid stevia, which I love. I think the liquid stevia does much better. It doesn't have the bitter aftertaste that some of the stevias have. So I really like that. But this is a special meal, a special occasion, so I'm going to use honey. And I'm just going to stir that in. And this is where, again, kind of your own flavors and own things come in. So to my dressing, I'm going to add some vanilla extract. These are, I think, the coolest things. I picked these up, and they have the vanilla bean in it, and you can make your own vanilla extract, and then you can use the vanilla bean several times. So this is actually my second batch, but I love it. And I'm just going to put about a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then about a teaspoon of cinnamon. I love cinnamon. You may not like cinnamon, and if you don't, then you don't have to add it. I just really think it helps bring out the flavor of the fruit. And I have to tell another story. I was doing one of the first conferences that I ever did with Annette, and I was doing a cooking class at the conference, and I was so excited and nervous. But I was going to do a smoothie, and I love to add cinnamon in my smoothies. I think it just gives it a wonderful flavor. Just kind of brings out, I think, the flavor of the fruits and things. And I got ready to make the smoothie, and I had a precious lady. She was as sweet as she can be, but she's like, I don't like cinnamon. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was glad she said that, though, because it did make me, to realize that, a lot of people don't like the same things that I may like. So I need to make sure I always have a second recipe to make. So again, some people don't like cinnamon. So, and I'm going to just kind of give this a little taste. You can see how creamy that's with that little bit of honey. Just going to bring it. And so I'm just going to kind of give it a taste. Wonderful. Plenty sweet. And then I'm just going to put this over my fruit. Now, like I said before, you can, and Annette's going to post the recipe that she uses when she does a fruit salad. She has one that her mom used to always make. And it's made with fresh whipping cream and vanilla, and it's wonderful as well. So again, you can put any kind of dressing that you want on it. Oh my goodness, it smells so wonderful. I may not be able to wait till our meal. I may have to have some of this before. This is just such a fresh, like I said, just such a refreshing compliment to your meal. And I take this a lot of times when we go places or we're having dinner with someone. I'll make a big fruit salad because everybody just seems to enjoy it, and it doesn't really take that long to prepare your fruit. And so, and there you can see those beautiful flavors. And I had some extra yogurt just in case that wasn't enough, because sometimes you just don't know how much fruit it's going to end up being, but that was plenty. So that, like I said, that was just about a cup of yogurt. So it didn't take a whole lot to make the dressing for my fruit salad. So now let me show you what we're going to do, how we're going to serve this. Grab my banana. Now you could definitely go ahead and put banana slices in here. If again, if you're feeding a large group of people and it's going to be all eaten at your meal, definitely can go ahead and put some bananas in it and maybe sprinkle a little lemon juice on your banana so it doesn't turn brown. So I'm going to put my fruit in there. So pretty. And then I'm going to take my banana. I'm just going to dice it kind of small just because I prefer it. I'm going to put that on the top. And then again, like I said, I really like texture. So I'm going to add just a few nuts. I'm going to kind of break them up a little bit. Sprinkle those on the top. You could add your nuts into your fruit salad as well. Some people just, may not prefer nuts. Of course, you may have somebody with a nut allergy, so you couldn't use them. So, and then I like to take some unsweetened coconut. I'm just going to sprinkle that on the top. And something fun, because, again, we're here at the spring, is I have some organic little mini marshmallows that are just so fun. So I'm just going to sprinkle just a few of those on there. My mom used to always mix in the little marshmallows in our fruit salad. So it just kind of brings back a fun memory. And then since I do have extra, I'm just going to come over here and put just a little dollop on top. So isn't that gorgeous and so fun? And I'm telling you, it tastes amazing. Just a fun little, like I said, it's kind of a light treat. And this could be your dessert. I mean, you could definitely use this as dessert, and I would be perfectly fine with that because I love it. So that is pretty much what I've got to show you today. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope this will inspire you to get in your kitchen. If you haven't been, and if you have already been in your kitchen, maybe just kind of inspire you to try some new things. And again, like I said, it's been so much fun, and so glad everybody joined us today. And let me know how these recipes turned out if you make them. I would love to hear. Like I said, if you'll post on Facebook or different things and just let us know and say, hey, I made this recipe and this is how it turned out. And I tried this and I added this herb and different things, because that is how I learn too. I love when Annette and I have been doing cooking classes at when we're doing conferences at different churches, is I love being able to speak with the people that are there, because they'll say, oh, I've done that, but then I added this or did that. I was like, oh, I like that. So it's just such a nice way to have a community to be able to learn those different things. And that's one thing where I really love what all Annette's doing, especially with the Biblical Nutritionist. And so that's just a wonderful community that we can all kind of come together and share our ideas, learn how to eat healthy. And it's just, like I said, just a fun place. So I hope you all enjoyed this. And again, I'm going to look forward to hearing from y'all to see how your recipes went. So thank you so much. And I hope y'all have a wonderful day.
Now we're going to make the sauce to go on top of our baked fruit delight. And it's very few ingredients. We're going to use this food processor because I just feel like it does a really good job. And we're going to use a half a cup of milk. I'm using coconut milk, but it could be any kind of your favorite milk. It could be almond milk. It could be any of those. To this, we're adding some cashews. To this, we're adding some dates. Okay, I could have done it this way and it would have been a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and add the dates to this and our frozen fruit. So I'm using strawberries. That's what's in the recipe, but it can be any frozen fruit you want. It could be blueberries, it could be cherries, it could be peaches. You can make this flavored sauce any flavor you want. Now, like I said, you can also make it the chocolate sauce, and some of your family may say, yes, definitely chocolate. Okay, so put this inside. And we're going to blend this up. This is where I think the Bosch is just my maid. The scripture says she gets her maids working. Well, this is one of my maids. Now it's still a little chunky, but I just want to stop because I wanted you to know I really want it as creamy as possible. So making sure those cashews are really been blended up really well. You can actually even soak the cashews before you do this, and they will cream up faster. And so that works really well. Now, another thing is sometimes fast is not always better. Sometimes slow is better because it keeps the food on the blade. And so when you go super fast, like I was doing, it kind of keeps the food up in the air. But I think we're going to have a beautiful sauce here. So here's our sauce. And the dates and the strawberries are going to make it plenty sweet. So now we're just going to serve our guest the baked fruit delight. You can put it in a nice dessert dish like I've shared with you. You can make it a salad. You can make it so many different things. You can make it for breakfast, lunch, dinner, just like I just shared with you. And put it on a bed of lettuce. You could top it with some yogurt. That would increase the protein. That would make a nice breakfast for your family. Add our strawberry topping. And we have our baked fruit delight. So I hope your family enjoys this. Be sure and put in the comments, have you tried this before? What sauce is your favorite? And how did you like it? So put that in the comments down below. Okay, so now we're going to move into making the mashed potatoes because we need to get them cooking on the stove. So I'm going to do a quick cleanup and we'll get started with the potatoes. All right, now it's time for our family favorite, which is mashed potatoes. And so today I'm using the Yukon Gold potatoes. Typically we are a red potato family, but I'm learning more and more that the Yukon Gold are actually not a bad potato. They're actually a good one. They have the resistant starch for our body to actually build a healthy microbiome. I just try to avoid the big white baked potatoes. So we've already chopped them up. Now the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I don't know if you've done this before, but we're going to actually boil them in some broth. Now broth can be expensive when you're buying it in the store, but I make all my own broth, so it's almost like a free food to us. So I'm going to cook it in the broth, and then we're going to mix them up, and we're going to make some herbed mashed potatoes. All right, so I just added the liquid. We're going to put this on the stove, and now we're going to move on to the Charoset. All right, now we're going to go ahead and mix up the Charoset. That is really just a simple basic recipe. It is just the chopped apples. And if you read in your recipe guide, you're going to see also why we serve this food specifically. So you can read that story to your family. We're going to add, I think I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to add my cinnamon to my honey so it gets mixed up a little bit better. And my nuts are here too, and I'm going to show you how I chop them up to make them just a little bit finer. So I kind of have a cinnamon honey here. And to this, we're also adding just a little bit of juice. I normally like to use organic pomegranate juice. Today, I'm actually using a beet juice. So it's not that my husband's going to recognize it anyway. I don't think so. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and mix this in. And it's just the apples and it's the nuts. You could use pecans or walnuts for this dish. And our seasonings. So here we have our nuts. They're pretty much in the half shape, so I'm going to go ahead and chop them up a little bit finer. And if you've watched my videos at all, you know this is one of my favorite tools to use. I don't know what I would do without this tool. Yeah, is that not the fastest, nut chopper you have? Got a few on the top, but yeah, perfect. Doesn't take very long, which is why I use it. Mix this in as well. Now you could serve this at room temperature or you could chill it so it tastes a little bit cold. And I kind of like it a little bit chilled better. But this is a mainstay in all Passover Passover meals. And that's all there is to it. This is the simplest recipe ever. You could add grapes to this. You could add raisins. You could vary it up. You could add a little lemon juice. You could change the juice to an apple juice, whatever you want. And there you have your Charoset, ready for a delicious Passover meal or a Resurrection Sunday lunch. I'm going to go ahead and finish the pie. It has cooled. It's come out of the oven and it's cooled. So I'm just going to take just a pinch of some cocoa powder, put it on the top. I'm also going to top it with just a little bit of sugar. Not that we really need to sweeten it anymore, but it kind of just adds a little bit of look to it. And then that is ready to serve. So there we go with that. You could even take this organic sugar, put it in your blender and make it into a powder. And that's where we get powdered sugar. So that would be a great way to add it on top as well. So our pie is done, ready to serve. I'm going to put it in the refrigerator because it's going to taste a lot better cold than it would hot. Although there are people who like hot fudge, so it's kind of a toss-up. If you need to add anything to it, yes, you could add a scoop of ice cream, or actually, instead of ice cream, I usually just do a sweetened yogurt, and that would be good for that. But it really doesn't need anything else. So, but just some ideas for you. All right, our potatoes are done cooking, so we're going to go ahead and add them to our Bosch mixer. Now, I made a lot of potatoes. I went ahead and did a whole 5-pound bag because, like I told you before, I need to keep my husband happy. And no, he can't eat all this in one meal, but we thrive on leftovers. And if he's eating leftovers, then I don't have to cook every night. So we're going to go ahead and we went ahead and made the whole 5-pound bag. And I'm going to make these more of an herb potato, which is why I kind of added the broth to the cooking. I'm going to add in some sour cream. And I was so tickled at the store. I was at Tom Leonard's, which I do a lot of the grocery store videos from. They had an organic yogurt. Let me find it here for you. And they're advertising that it's probiotic rich, it's non-GMO, it's organic. It's called Nancy's Organic Sour Cream. They also had cottage cheese and yogurt. And I've been tasting the cottage cheese and the yogurt and saying, that is good stuff. So you might want to check out that brand. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of butter. And now these are going to be herb potatoes. We already have a flavor enhanced by using the broth to cook them in. We're going to go ahead and add some green onions. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but when you cook your potatoes, the sauce left over from the potatoes, the water, which we normally throw down the drain, is the perfect sauce, the perfect water, the perfect liquid to make a gravy. Now, we're not serving a gravy with this meal, but save it next time when you're making a gravy and use that instead. We're actually going to use a little bit of chopped parsley in our potatoes as well. So these are going to be our herbed potatoes, especially for Passover and Resurrection Sunday lunch. Okay. My favorite seasoning is Morton's Nature Seasonings. I use this instead of a regular salt and pepper. It has other flavors in it as well. So I'm going to add some of that to the mix. And this is where, once again, my Bosch makes short work of mixing these up and whipping them up. I remember the days when I did it by hand, and now I don't. I totally just use my Bosch. And first step is always make sure it is plugged in. So we will plug that in and turn that on. We did leave some of the skin on the potato. I just like that. If they've been scrubbed clean and they are a good potato, the skin actually has a lot of nutritional value to it. So you're going to see little specks of that in my mashed potatoes. Then how long you whip them up is totally your own preference. Some people like lumps in their potatoes. In fact, that's more gourmet than having them super creamy. My husband likes them a little bit more creamy, so I'm going to mix them up a little bit longer. Doesn't take long with the Bosch mixer because this is a powerhouse. If you do not have a Bosch mixer yet, you might want to look into it. It just makes cooking fun. There's also another video I have out there. Look how yellow and creamy they look. Another video I have out there which compares the Bosch mixer to the Nutrimil Artiste. So you might want to check that out. Oh, these just look gorgeous. These are some gorgeous looking potatoes. I don't know if your family cares if your potatoes look gorgeous or not, but these do. Very bright and colorful because we use the Yukon Gold potatoes. They have a stronger color because we used a broth to cook them in versus just water. Water tends to leach out the nutrition, whereas a broth helps the nutrition stay in. And then adding the herbs and the green onions all together make these just, I don't know, I like to feel good about what I put on the table. And I'm going to feel really good about these potatoes because they just look gourmet style. And I will never tell you I'm a gourmet cook, but I can pretend to be. All right, so let's just go ahead and serve those up. So what you've seen from my kitchen is the herbed mashed potatoes. You've seen the chocolate fudge pie, the baked apple delight with the sauce that goes on top, the topping. We've also done the lamb and the quinoa parsley salad. And pretty much that's what we did here. So as you saw from Rhonda's kitchen, some other delicious recipes as well. We wanted to give you a good arrangement, a good variety, and we wanted you to recognize that, hey, these dishes can help us share the story. And what I didn't share with you in one of the dishes was the baked fruit delight. It has dates in it. Dates are all throughout Scripture. Many times they're mentioned. They're also one of the 7 foods of the Promised Land. So it was a date honey that was there in the Promised Land. So just a lot of good nutrition. You can go through many Bible stories. Definitely get your own little book on how to share the Seder meal with your family and just make this meal a delight. Now let me go ahead and arrange the foods that we've cooked for you today, and I'll share that with you and just help you put it all together. I just want to thank you for joining us for this Passover cooking class. I have totally enjoyed putting these together for you and actually also adding my notes into that handout. I keep mentioning the handout because I really want that to be your keepsake to take home, make your notes, and decide for yourself, what do you want to serve your family? So together with these dishes that I put together and the dishes that Rhonda's been teaching you at the same time, it's really been our joy to serve you God's recipe for excellent health. And yes, it includes delicious food. And yet we get to share the story of God's love with almost every dish here. So I hope you have fun this Passover. I hope you enjoy it as we go back and we remember what Jesus did for us. The Old Testament is 100% a story of Jesus's life and what he's coming to do. The New Testament is the fulfillment of that story. And we as Gentiles, we as Christians get to enjoy every one of these feasts, and not because we have to, but because we want to. We want to relearn the stories of all of these festivals in biblical days. Because as we relearn them, as we enjoy them, as we act them out with our kids, we are reminding ourselves about God's love. And that's always the number one ingredient in God's recipe for excellent health. Because it's not just about the physical, it's about the spiritual. And every one of the foods that Scripture talks about leads us to the spiritual. He uses stories that will draw us in, and food always draws us in. And so I just want to say thank you for letting us share this with you today. I can't wait to read your comments, how you liked these different dishes. How did you make them more unique for yourself? And most of all, let this Passover, let this Resurrection Sunday be such a joyous occasion that no matter what's going on in our world around us, we know God's in control and God loves us. And he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. His love never changes, and he loves you. He's loved you from the moment of conception. He has a plan for your life. He's loved you with an everlasting love. And as I said, that never changes. So thank you for letting me share with you this Passover cooking. I want to thank Rhonda for doing her part as well. And for my helper here, Vivian, she's been a great help putting this together. And we have a whole team of people behind the scenes working on it as well. It's not just me. We are a complete family of the Biblical Nutritionists. So thanks for watching. I can't wait to read your comments and keep serving Jesus's festivals so we can continue learning and understanding what Scripture is trying to teach us. Thanks for joining us today.